Welcome back, Capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today, we are continuing my preseason win total best bet series. Today, we are looking at the Big Ten. Last week, we looked at the SEC, so be sure to check that video out as well after this one. As always, be sure to like and subscribe. If you do enjoy the video, it helps me out a ton. I would appreciate it so much. And without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into it, starting with a big team, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, all of these preseason win totals are brought to you by FanDuel. They are officially out, so if you do not believe me for some, go ahead and check it out. Go see it for yourself. And I say that specifically for Ohio State because their preseason win total in 2026, according to FanDuel, is 9.5. Now, the implied probability tells a bit of a different story. The over has about a 61.2% chance to hit, the under 43.9. But you still may be wondering, how is this preseason win total for a team like Ohio State still just 9.5 going into 2026? Well, the main reason for that is because their schedule is absolutely brutal in 2026. On the road, they face Texas in the non-conference, Iowa, Indiana, the former national champion last year, USC, and Nebraska. At home, it's Illinois, Maryland, Oregon, Northwestern, and Michigan. Now, they do get pretty great bye placement, in my opinion. They go on the road versus Indiana, get the bye week, and then go on the road versus USC. So it's not as bad as playing both of those teams on the road back-to-back, but still very tough schedule. So that is why the preseason win total is so low. And they're also undergoing a regime change on offense. The last couple years, they had Brian Hartline as their offensive coordinator, who did a fantastic job. He takes the jump to South Florida. They replace him with Arthur Smith, formerly of, I believe, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And me saying this might make you think, am I going the under on Ohio State? Absolutely not. We have to remember who we're talking about. This is the Ohio State Buckeyes. They haven't gone under 10 wins in the regular season since 2011, and that was with Luke Fickell after the whole Jim Tressel fiasco. So I don't think they're in dire straits in 2026. On top of that, they return a majority of their snaps on offensive line. They return Julian Sayin. They return guys like Jeremiah Smith and Bo Jackson to help that offense. And they add key pieces on defense to replace what they lost from last season. On top of that, Ohio State is one of the most talented teams in the country. They're never going to be short of talent. They're never going to have to undergo a full rebuild, even if they lose a ton of production on either side of the ball. So with that, I am going over 9.5 wins for Ohio State in 2026. I feel like this easily hits, and that is why the over is set at -158. Not the best bet in the world, but in terms of what I believe is going to hit, this is absolutely a lock for next season. And after them, it might be a little bit controversial. We have the UCLA Bruins. According to FanDuel, their preseason win total is 5.5, and the implied probability on those is 60% on the over, 45% on the under. And if you have been living under a rock, UCLA hires James Madison's Bob Chesney to take the reins for the Bruins. Now, if you have not heard of Bob Chesney, if you're not tuned into the group of five, he just brought James Madison to the playoff. He's been one of the most elite coaches at the group of five level for the past couple seasons. And at James Madison, he ran an offensive scheme that fits Nico Iamaleava perfect, who remains at UCLA despite them losing their coach that recruited him to play there. And on top of that, with Nico still there, they return 73% of their offensive production from last season. They add some key guys from James Madison as well to help bolster both sides of the offense and the defense especially, which keen ears may hear and be like, didn't Curt Cignetti do that at Indiana? And yes, he did do that. Took a bunch of talent from James Madison, turned Indiana into a national champion. I wouldn't go that far just yet with Bob Chesney, I am just saying. And with that, they add the second best portal class in the Big Ten, 12th overall in the country going into next season. And they don't have a terrible schedule overall. On the road, they face Cal in the out of conference, which should be a little bit difficult. Maryland, Oregon, Minnesota, and Michigan. At home, San Diego State, Purdue, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Nevada, Illinois, and USC. And I take a look at that home schedule and I think a lot of those games are winnable. There's 7 games there. I think they could win 6 of those very, very easily. Now, like I said, UCLA is definitely not the next Indiana. There's still a ton of question marks on defense, but with the new talent, with the new scheme they bring in from James Madison, with the proven ability of Nico Iamaleava meshing with that system, I think this team will be very, very scary for a lot of Big Ten teams to face this year. I think the offense specifically could be very dangerous, and I am going with the over at -150 on the 5.5 win total for the UCLA Bruins in 2026. And after them couldn't put them back to back, that felt a little bit risky. It is the Michigan Wolverines. Their preseason win total is 8.5. The implied probability on that is 48.5% on the over, 56.5% on the under. And they're another team on this list that undergoes a coaching staff overhaul. They bring in Kyle Whittingham, one of the winningest coaches of all time, to replace Sharon Moore. And they do lose a good bit of talent throughout that transition, but I choose to see it more as shedding skin. Whittingham brings a few pieces over from Utah, namely John Daly Henry, the borderline elite defensive lineman for Utah last season. I think he will be a big impact piece following Whittingham to Michigan. On top of that, returning for the Wolverines, 70% of the snaps on offensive line. You return your quarterback, Bryce Underwood, who you now pair with Jason Beck, formerly the offensive coordinator at Utah with Kyle Whittingham. And that pairing feels like a match made in heaven for Bryce Underwood. Look at Devin Dampier for the Utah Utes last year with Jason Beck as their offensive coordinator, one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country. And I like Devin Dampier. I'm a Devin Dampier truther. I think Underwood has more raw talent than Devin Dampier. I think he could be better with the correct coaching, with the correct coaching staff in place, which I now think he has at Michigan with Jason Beck at offensive coordinator. Like I said, still very raw as a quarterback talent, just a true sophomore going into his second season as a starter, but I think there is a ton of talent to work with for Jason Beck. I think it could be dangerous if they get it going in year 2 with Underwood. And as for the schedule, it is pretty difficult, but it is manageable. They have 4 straight home games to start the season. On the road, they face Minnesota, Rutgers, Oregon, and Ohio State. At home, Western Michigan, Oklahoma, UTEP, Iowa, Penn State, Indiana, Michigan State, Oregon, and UCLA. And for the sake of my argument, I won't necessarily go ahead and say these are locked in, but if we just pencil in at Oregon and at Ohio State as losses, they would have to lose to 2 of the following: Indiana, Penn State, Oklahoma, and Iowa. I think they can go 3-1 there. Indiana is obviously the most difficult team there. I think they can beat Oklahoma at home. I think they can beat Penn State, who's in a bit of a rebuild in their own right, and I definitely think they can beat Iowa. So with that, I am going with the over. I think they can win 9 games in year 1 under Kyle Whittingham. So I am going, like I said, with the over 8.5 at +106. Pretty good value, I think. Obviously, a little bit less likely in terms of implied probability, but I am more than willing to deal with that. I believe in these Michigan Wolverines in year 1 under Kyle Whittingham. And last but certainly not least, it is the Penn State Nittany Lions. Their preseason win total is 9.5. The implied probability there is 45.5% for the over, 59.7% for the under. And they are yet another team who are undergoing a regime change that I was just talking about. They bring in Matt Campbell from Iowa State to replace James Franklin. I think that move could pay off very well in the future. And as for this year, I actually really like their roster. They import a lot of key players from that Iowa State roster, like Rocco Beck, for example. They obviously lose a ton of talent, which is natural when you undergo a regime change, which is what we've talked about for a few of these teams so far already on this list. And my biggest worry for them overall is the offensive line. They have to replace 3 starters. They do obviously still have talent, but losing that production is a bit of a question mark going into 2026. But other than that, I think the defense and the defensive line specifically will be strong with D'Anton Lynn now at Penn State as their defensive coordinator. And you might be wondering, looking at this number, 9.5, it's the same as Ohio State, and it's for the opposite reason. It's because Penn State's schedule is actually very easy. Looking at it at first glance, on the road they have Temple, Northwestern, Michigan, Washington, and Maryland. At home, Marshall, Buffalo, Wisconsin, USC, Purdue, Minnesota, and Rutgers. very, very easy November schedule on top of that. So 10 wins is actually within the realm of possibility for the Penn State Nittany Lions. So with me saying that, you might be thinking that I'm going with the over, but I think their ceiling is just a little bit lower than it might have been in the last few seasons under James Franklin. I do think their floor is higher in year one. I don't think they have a 6-win season once again. I don't think they end up having to fire their head coach halfway through the season, which is a very, very good thing. I just don't quite think in year one that Matt Campbell and his staff and this roster are capable of going 10-2 or better. I am very high on them going forward, like I believe I already said, but in year one, I expect them to be strong, but not quite elite in the Big Ten. I project them to go either 9-3 and 8-4, which means I have the under hitting at -148. And that is going to wrap up the Big Ten best bets. Let me know what you think in the comments of my picks down below. Who would you add? What picks of mine might you be fading? Leave that down below. And as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next week for the Big 12/ACC best bets. I'll be doing one video for both of those conferences, so be sure to check it out. And like I said, thank you for watching, and I will see you there.